I'll
You don't have to
try
harp.
that. I'll try that with songs that are really
Here
too
we
low
go.
for me.
I'll have to shut up. Our host is here. I'll text. I can text you.
Don't mind me.
Sorry, Glenn.
Let's see. I'm glad y'all are early. All right. How's everybody doing? Let me see if I can get everything set up.
Doing well. We're getting the worm.
Okay. Let's see. Does anybody have anything that's on their mind?
I had a question, Clint.
Let's hear it, Cecilia.
Thank you. You've given us a lot of these, the whole range of tunings we can use.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm listening to a song that I want to learn how to play, and the artist has included the tuning that they're using, that's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Or on your lessons on Patreon, you're always got what the tuning is and if you've adjusted it for your voice, and that's super helpful. But if I'm just listening to a recording and don't have any of that information, how do you kind of hear what tuning that song is in to start picking it out? Or is that, how do you do that? How do you pick a song out if you don't have that information?
It's tricky. So it's like everything else. A lot of stuff what we're going to be discussing here, it takes sort of an acquired taste. That's why I'm I'm a real harpy when it comes to harping on about, people always encourage people, put your citation, all the information that you know about a song, especially if you're uploading it somewhere. There's no excuse not to include all the information possible. And even if you're on stage performing, it's nice if you have time, if it's that kind of setting, to give a verbal citation and tell the story of where you learned a piece and so forth. So if the person hasn't done any of that and you can't find that information, it can be a real challenge. It's basically part of the game, So, but the first thing I'll do is I'll think, does it sound major or minor? So for us laymen, a major sounding song is like, it's like this A, B, C, C, G, G, it's real upbeat, positive sounding. I think everybody can, it's just sort of what most of these songs sound like. And then you have stuff that's maybe has a minor sound, So that's an example of a minor piece, minor sounding modal piece versus a major upbeat piece. Most of our traditional repertoire is sort of majory stuff, might slip into a minor chord once in a while. So that's the first two things I'll look for. I'll say, does it sound kind of dark and kind of down, kind of it's a dark negative energy, or is it a real bright positive energy? So if it's real bright and positive sounding, it's probably in standard G tuning. It may be in double C, and that's pretty much most of the stuff that people play is either in standard G tuning, maybe it's in double C tuning, and that pretty much covers your upbeat stuff. You might occasionally encounter, there's variations on those tunings that are still like major tunings. So there's that. If it has that dark, creepy sound, there is always a possibility that it is played in a major tuning, but just they're chording like crazy. That's how bluegrassers do it. They almost never leave standard G tuning, but they use lots of chord shapes. So if it has that dark sound, it's probably G minor, G, D, G, C, D. That's the most common minor tuning that banjo players are going to use. The other one that's probably equally or almost as common is the Rubin tuning, F sharp D, F sharp A D. So that's those are probably your two most common minor tunings, and everything else, almost not everything, but a lot of the other tunings, most of them seem to be built off of those two. So like the tunings that Doc Boggs uses, those great dark minor tunings like F sharp D, G A D, that's basically a variation. And then you'll find other examples of that. But I think that's probably all I should really say. I don't want to spend too much time on that because it's one of those responses where Cliff can just go on forever and be like, I don't really know. So that's probably the best way to think about it. If it's upbeat, it's probably major, and it's probably double C or standard G. If it's a downbeat, bluesy, sad kind of song, it's probably minor, and it's probably G minor or Rubin tuning. That was probably the best place to start with that. So how about that, Cecilia? What do you think?
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yes.
Okay. That'll probably get you well on your way. Anybody else have anything that's on their mind? And somebody's using the chat. Okay, I better use the chat too. So Richard says, I've seen a video of a girl playing an A with a capo. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I have a question about advanced technique. Richard, are you in here? Richard.
Oh, just unmuted myself.
Here we go. How you doing,
Hi.
Richard?
Hi, I'm doing good. That thing at the top was for the girl that was trying to sing in a high key. Yeah, I just heard that version of going to Mexico. I think some girl was singing it and you really enjoyed it. But my question, I've only heard this a couple of times. It's like you've been pulling all the stops for this one. There's you're doing the bum ditty and the Kentucky pull off, as well as plucking the melody, but you're going into it, and then you almost start to walk the keyboard, but then you do this roll with your fingers, sort of that thing like there.
Yeah, kind of doing that.
Yeah, I've only seen you do that once in video, and you explained it a little bit in the lessons.
Let's see if I can drop this, and I'll try to. Y'all let me know if this sounds too loud or something. I can adjust. Well, there's another thing I need to do. Go up here and change my sound setting real quick. So yeah, you're talking about this little thing that I don't really think I ever teach it because it's kind of difficult to teach. And another person who does that, I've noticed doing that a lot, is actually Jerron Paxton. You guys should be familiar with Jerron Paxton. Great, mostly a guitar player from out in California, a black kid. He's only a few years younger than me now. But anyhow, he does that a lot. Kind of a couple things, and I'm not sure if he got it from me or not, but I know I just kind of came up with it. But let's see if I can. You're talking about that kind of thing. I think the thing I was talking about with Jerron is something else where I kind of do an up pick. That little rolling thing, that's something that George Gibson does real expertly. If you can find footage of George playing anything overhand where he kind of drifts into that, all he's doing is that same sort of Kentucky lick. What did I decide to call that? The double shuffle. So all he's doing is the double shuffle, but he is really, because George is 80-something years old, he's been playing this music forever, he is really getting maximum effect out of his hand. And so when you see me doing that, I'm trying to channel the way George does it. And what he's really doing is he's doing that double shuffle, which is really just. And that's how most people do it. It's still kind of chunky. But George he's trying to really get that smooth as silk, as smooth as possible. And the way he does that is instead of when you do your brush follow through, like I teach people to brush all the strings with all of their spare fingers. That's generally how George brushes too. But there, to get that super fluid motion, he's really taking advantage of his ring finger. And so he's emphasizing, he's picking the melody note down with his trigger finger. He's plucking that open string off with usually his ring finger up here, whatever finger you want to use. And then he's leading with his ring finger, which is something he doesn't ever do except when he's doing that. And so if you lead with your ring finger on that brush, it helps you. If you do this for hours and hours, you'll see what I'm talking about. It helps you kind of ease into that roll and get it more rolling sounding, kind of smooth out that roll to where most of us are doing that double shuffle. Even listen to Rufus Crisp on that, I think it's 1946 recordings of Rufus Crisp, where he explains the double shuffle. He breaks it down and teaches you how to play the double shuffle. Rufus's double shuffle is real harsh, His double shuffle is real harsh, and so mine typically is too. What George is doing there and what you see me trying to do is smooth that double shuffle out. So instead of that, you smooth it out with by leading with your ring finger. So it's all down picking, really hard. It's really hard to convey how it's done, but you're leading with your ring finger, but you're kind of smoothing it out. It's one of those things that it just takes hours of training and trying to do it. But you don't have to ever do that. I mean, think of Rufus Crisp, wonderful banjo player that never really did that. He just did it straight. Yeah, that's really when I'm really trying to really cut a rug and really break into the rhythm, like break into a smooth kind of trance. When I'm overhanding that's when you'll see me do it. I'm just trying to get the smoothest sound possible. So
I've only heard you do it a couple of times, but I'm also curious when you're doing the that flicky thing, are you ever catching any strings with your fourth and fifth fingers?
Yeah, I'm not catching anything up. I'm not pulling up, not plucking up on anything when I do that. It's all the back of my nails. And it's probably all of these fingers are kind of doing it, but I'm kind of leading it with my ring finger. It's hard to explain. And probably really, instead of thinking about it visually, think about like what George is trying to do, who I'm trying to emulate. And really, he's just trying to smooth that roll out as much as possible. And he is using his ring finger to brush. And that's probably the best way to think about it. So try to think about when you're doing that. And if you want to smooth up your sound a little bit, try to just brush with the ring finger and use your ring finger separate. So when you're picking down with your regular picking finger, whether it's your middle or your trigger finger, but you're brushing, really kind of emphasizing the brush with your ring finger, you kind of naturally get that weird flicky look. And sort of your pinky and your middle finger are kind of like doing nothing. They're just kind of for show. It's really like I could probably do it like that. Yeah, so you really don't even need a middle finger or a pinky finger to do that. It's all in the ring finger. His other fingers just kind of fluttering along with it. And it's all down picking. Okay,
Thanks,
Richard,
Cliff.
anything else on your mind?
Not at the moment. I've just been gobbling up all your material, and I'm loving it.
Oh yeah, I'm glad to hear that, man. Cool, awesome.
Thank you.
Cool, yes sir. I'm gonna try to pull up somebody else. What tuning do you use for How Came That Blood on Your Shirt Sleeve? I want to say, Karen, that I think that's just, I haven't played this in a long time. It's G minor, G, D, G, C, D. How came that blood on your shirt sleeve? Oh, pray, love, love, tell me. It is the blood of my brother-in-law who went astray with me. Who went astray with me. That's pretty neat. Man, I need to do a lesson on that. Would be one for like old leather stocking to do, for example. Thanks for reminding me of that, Karen. I haven't played that in forever. How came that blood? I learned that tune from Art Rosenbaum, and Art actually recorded that. So you can actually pull up Art's recording of it. Art's a great banjo player. How came that blood? I'm gonna make sure I do a lesson on that. Cool. Thank you, Karen. Let's see. I'm gonna get to some more questions. What tuning? And Edward, what are your recommendations about using a thumb pick and/or thimbles for achieving a more traditional sound? Edward, I'm gonna try to pull you up. I guess if you want to be pulled up. Edward.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, here he is, Edward. You got to help me, Edward, come up with a better response to that, because I could just give you my standard spiel on fingerpicks and stuff, but what specifically is going on with you?
Well, Mr. Hooks in his website says that the thimbles are really used a lot for achieving a more, like my banjo does. When I use my fingers, you know, the pads on my fingers are kind of soft, and they're inconsistent, you know, like but finger picks, I've used finger picks.
Yeah.
And of course the more narrow string spacing on the traditional banjos, you know, your fingers get a little bit more. I'm just curious, did the traditional pickers usually use picks or the thimbles?
Typically, it's hard to say. This is sort of a nuanced question. So typically, no. Typically, most people throughout the history of the banjo, most banjo players have been bare finger players throughout. I mean, if we're looking back over 200 or 300 years of history, the use of and they first started calling them plectrums and thimbles and stuff. The first ones that actually went over a finger, they called it a thimble. That makes sense. But a flat pick was always called a plectrum. So the idea of doing that was introduced, after the Civil War, 1870s, 1880s, and it got more popular after the 1900s. But it never really caught on in the traditional scene at that time. I want to say it really wasn't until Earl Scruggs put finger picks on, and I'll say Earl Scruggs and other people of his day, when they were transitioning to the cheap steel strings. They wanted to get this whopper, crazy fast sound. They started using the finger picks that were marketed to guitar players, like steel guitar players and stuff. And everybody's seen those, the standard banjo finger picks. So those got really big in the 1940s. They blew up, and everybody wanted that sound and had to play with finger picks. After the 1940s, if you look through the field recordings and stuff like that, you start to see the thumb pick especially show up in traditional music. Lucius Smith, I want to say is his name, black banjo player they recorded, I want to say in Virginia. Lucius Smith used a thumb pick. Roscoe Holcomb typically used a thumb pick, and I want to say a finger pick. He typically used picks when he down picked. Pete Seeger used picks, of course. He would use, that's one of the reasons why he down picked with his middle finger, was because he liked to use a finger pick on his index finger. So he'd have a thumb pick and a finger pick to finger pick and stuff, but then when he went to down pick, he would use his middle finger. So lots of people started using them, and you see a lot of the thumb pick, especially with a lot of two finger pickers or banjoists in general, they'd want to use that thumb pick. And I want to say I've seen video footage of Roscoe where he's got thumb and forefinger pick on, and when they ask him to play an overhand tune, he just removes the pick off of his index finger. So he down picks with just a thumb pick and no pick on his index finger. So it was definitely done and still is done. I went through a period myself where, you know, when I was first learning two finger, where I wanted to use finger picks for two finger picking. So I did it for probably a year or so, and it didn't stick with me. Me personally, I've always preferred bare finger on the bare string. I've never liked the idea personally of anything coming between me and the string. I like to be able to fully wrap the meat of my finger around the string, know exactly where it is, not have like something, an intermediary between me and the string. That's the way I feel about it. At the same time, I don't deny that finger picks have their place, sound awesome, stuff like that. But I guess that's probably answered your question, Edward. I mean, it's perfectly fine if you want to use bluegrass finger picks, if you want to experiment with the thimbles that Joel Hooks offers. There's even another website. These are probably the most expensive option. I have some of these around I could show you. They're called Claw Jam finger picks. Claw Jam. And they're USA made. The guy makes each finger pick by hand. And you can get them made out of copper or whatever you want. They're about $25 for a finger pick. But it's an interesting finger pick. You should look up clawjam.com. And the guy hand makes each one. It's a pick that covers the back and the front of your finger, so that you can down pick or up pick with a metal finger pick. So I would look into Claw Jam, and I would look into Joel Hooks' stuff, and you may find that you just want to use modern, bluegrass style finger picks, which is totally acceptable. Really, the main thing is just whatever gets you playing, whatever makes you enjoy the instrument, let's do that. I like to keep it within the traditional sphere, because if you plug the damn thing in, then we kind of can't do what we're doing, But if you want to use finger picks or steel strings, resonators, whatever, I totally embrace that and encourage that if it's gonna get you to play.
I just want to add one more little comment. I watched that little Dinks video that you had up, and he was using it looked like a Swiss Army knife as a slide.
Yeah.
Is
that the video I just put up this morning somewhere?
Well, no, it was the other day, last
ago.
week or something.
Yeah, with Dink Roberts,
and
black and white film
sticking,
of. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got a Swiss Army knife using it as a slide in between his fingers, which was interesting to watch. But okay, thanks a lot.
A very common technique that people don't do very much anymore. I think I just posted again on like social media stuff a film clip of Morgan Sexton, who's a traditional banjo player up in Kentucky. This is Lee Sexton's uncle, I believe. And Morgan, if you go look, he's got the banjo in his lap, and he's using the end of a pocket knife, like a case pocket knife. I think I just put that up this morning, so y'all can go check that out. Okay, Edward, if that's all that's on your mind, I'm going to move on.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Jim wants to talk about recommended vintage makers of banjos, and I think this is something we should discuss. Jim, are you still with us? Holler.
Yep.
There he is.
Here I am.
So, Jim, this is a question that's super commonly asked, and it's a tricky question, like all this stuff. You have makers who their quality changed over time, and you have makers who maybe stole somebody's name after they died and didn't make a product that was the same. So there's all kinds of variety and stuff. Anything that says Fairbanks on it is generally going to be pretty good. Anything that says Cole or Stewart on it is generally going to be pretty good. Those are the names that you mentioned. The other thing to keep in mind is that all three of those companies, and at one time Fairbanks and Cole were one company, so that's tricky. But all three of those companies you mentioned, they all made various grades of instruments. So you can find a Cole or a Stewart banjo that's only worth $300 or $400, and you can find a Cole or a Stewart banjo that's worth $8,000 or $10,000. So that's tricky too. The best thing you can do is when you're shopping around, you have access to me, for example, so you can always email me or post somewhere, get the pictures to me. I encourage people to run things by me before you make a big purchase, or whatever that a big purchase is to you. Before you spend your money, you have access to me. I will respond, and you can send the pictures of the banjo to me and send the link to the ad if you're going to buy it off the internet or whatever. And that doesn't hurt because then I can look at it, and a lot of times I can just see right off the bat whether it's going to be good or not. So that's one thing I can do to you. The other thing is there's banjohangout.org. If you're not familiar with that website, banjohangout.org, they have a forum there called Collector's Corner, and that is probably the heaviest concentration of researchers and collectors of banjos on the internet, and they're very active. So if you join banjohangout.org and you post pictures in that forum, they'll tell you right away, with no regard for your feelings, like what you're looking at. So that's a good place to go. That's really the best. And when it comes to throwing out brands and stuff, who knows? But bacon banjos. Pretty much, they never really made a bad bacon. Anything that's I don't know, Gibson, there's Gibson banjos are all either good or valuable, etc. But those names are kind of easy to pull up. Like I would say again, Jim, just run it past me, or run it past some collectors on that thing. Also, if you have access, if you use Facebook or any of that, you can post it in our group on Facebook. But that's probably the best advice I can give you on that, Jim. Is there anything else on your mind?
No, that's good. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, run it by me. You have my email, right?
Yeah, well, I've just been connecting through the website.
That works, yeah. Well, any way that you want to contact me, you're welcome to. If you start to narrow that down on something that you might buy, wouldn't hurt to run it past me or run it by somebody. So.
Thanks. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do that.
Awesome,
Appreciate
Jim.
it.
Ed, I did look up LNP292. That guy's good. I don't really know what else to say about him. It's a YouTube channel. It looks like an older guy who plays a bunch of banjo tunes, LNP292. Ed is real into it. He's pretty good. I don't know who he is, Ed. I don't know nothing about him.
He seems to use the first string as a drone as opposed to the fifth string. I don't know if you notice that or not, but he hits the first string almost every time he plays another note.
Yeah, there's all kinds of, there's a million and one ways to do it. That brings to mind something that, George Gibson told me about his dad. His dad would double with his thumb all the time. So his dad was one of these guys that was always doubling with that thumb like crazy. And what's interesting is that George can recreate that, and he can do it too. So that you can get a lot of stuff going on if you're doubling with your thumb and you're doing the double shuffle up here. Good Lord. And you can see George trying to emulate his father's style on that video that he did with Mike Seeger. Mike Seeger it's called Just Around the Bend. You can actually look that up, and you can see George play that style. But not the exact thing that Ed's talking about, but another example of a way to fit in another weird drone. David has a big long one. David, are you with us still? David Tupper?
I am.
Hey, well, you got a big long one there, and how about you just tell it to me?
Okay, here, I'll just read it out for you. I just got to pull up the chat again. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, so you took the time this past week to listen to In the Pines.
In the Pines. I'd heard it done before by Leadbelly, but I always like the cover Nirvana did of it on MTV Unplugged. After looking at how to play the chords on guitar, it's just E, A, G, B, 7E, which is pretty easy to play. It's all like in the first 3 frets. For such a laconic song, it seems like it's still major based on those chords. I tried by ear to sort of adapt across between the vocal melody and the bass walk down line near the end of each measure.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the 2-finger waltz time, that and a combination of my inexperience, but it sounds kind of sparse.
Yeah.
And while this works for such a mournsome mood of a song, it ends up sounding more like guitar finger picking to me than banjo. And I was wondering if you might have any advice on how to fill in such an arrangement, or should I just go full steam ahead with what I have and expect that I'll end up filling it in with more as I learn as I go?
Well, I would say definitely continue full steam ahead and expect that you'll fill it in later as you go. I always recommend people don't get hung up on stuff like this. But at the same time, we can still talk about. I agree with everything you said. I've noticed all those things. How when you string that tune together and you start playing it, it is kind of sparse, and I don't really understand why that is. I could try to explain why that is, but yeah, the old bluegrass recording of, I forget the names. It's like these two white boy bluegrass guys in the 40s or 50s that recorded it, and they
Yeah, I
played
think
it
I
in.
stumbled on that on YouTube.
Yeah, they played in a standard G tuning, I think. So it's like. No, something, I don't know. But
It's okay. I understand.
and so one way, and what tuning are you using for the banjo to play this?
I've been trying to stick with open G tuned down to F, like you do a lot. If I understand correctly, you do a lot of your videos on YouTube. So I've been trying to stick with that. I mean, it's all, whether you're playing a G song or whatever, like it all.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's lower, that's fine, but it's all going to sound sort of similar. I mean, if I can make the time, I mean, I guess I could probably, if I feel confident enough, I could like throw together what I've done and maybe post it, like send it to email or post it to the Facebook group if you want to.
That would be cool. I encourage people to do that. A couple more. So I think in the recording that I posted of that recently, I did a YouTube video of that like earlier this year or something, and I want to say I did it in double C or GC, GCE. So not that that's such a, I think I did it in double C. Not that that's such a great improvement. The way I had never heard that song played on the banjo before until I heard George Gibson play it. Like everything else, when I was a kid, George played it for me one time. He played it in the Rubin tuning, F sharp D, F sharp A D. He played it overhand, and he did not play it in waltz timing. So he played it as a straight 4/4 piece, down picking, clawhammer, overhand, hoedown style in F sharp D, F sharp A D. Now, it's still, when you play it the way he did it, it still comes off kind of sparse. You have sort of a long stretch there where you're just kind of holding one string and just kind of going boom chicka for a while. So, but when I heard George did it, he pulled it off beautifully, So I don't know. And if you have a guitar background, like how the hell does Leadbelly do it, And is Kurt Cobain's version did he just try to copy Leadbelly, or did he take another departure? I don't know.
There's departure points of his playing. It's worth watching. It's on YouTube. It's not. I mean, I wasn't even trying to like literally copy either one of them, which is why I tried to basically like listen to what they did.
Yeah.
And using what I saw of the simple chordal arrangement, just try and come up with something myself. But I'm trying to like keep in the spirit of what I believe it is that you're trying to communicate here.
Yeah. I think also the song, probably started out as an unaccompanied song. And so who knows what it actually sounded like originally. That probably is some of the reason why it's a popular song for some weird, strange reason, because it's different, but yet it sounds so plain. I know what you're what you're dealing with. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll just keep with what I got. Work
Yeah,
with that.
and don't be afraid
Appreciate
to
it.
let it be kind of sparse. Don't be afraid to let it be kind of austere. Like I notice a lot of times with my mentors, my main mentor, of course, George, he'll retune the banjo like crazy to some weird tuning to where he doesn't ever mash but one finger down on the fingerboard. And he doesn't like to use a lot of chords, even though he can chord just fine. He likes to be austere about it and be sparse about it. He kind of likes that sound. And if you listening to him and other people, that kind of austere, sparse quality, Spartan, you might say, quality to the
Right.
music is something that's missing from a lot of the modern interpretations. It's just a lot of the modern music is not sparse or Spartan or austere at all. They've just jammed every little frill and buttercup into it that they could possibly jam into it, right? And so maybe it's okay to just let your version be kind of Spartan or whatever. And so you might have noticed maybe I did that in my banjo version of it. Like I don't try to fill in a note there where it seems kind of empty. I just let it ride, let it be sparse. And sometimes it may not sound the prettiest that way, but it sounds the most like a banjo to me, if that makes sense. A lot of times the banjo is sort of a saucy, austere kind of instrument, and so you don't, these beautiful full chord shapes, maybe you don't always want to even do that, It just
Yeah, because
depends.
for the most part, chords don't really, they don't ring out on a banjo anyway. You kind of expect them to decay pretty quickly anyway, unlike a
Yeah.
guitar. So, it's probably an advantage of the instrument once you take advantage of it.
Yeah, and the traditional banjo player historically is using numerous open tunings, presumably we think to avoid using chord shapes. So,
Makes
and
sense.
they're playing on fretless instruments. They are not chording very much. Cool. That was interesting, David. Please
Thank
do
you.
post your progress somewhere.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to get to another person. Jacob says, do you have any recommendation for exercise to practice the thumb when doing overhand picking? That exercise for your thumb. Well, you guys know I've gone over the stretches and the hand exercise. I won't show you that anymore. You've probably heard me harp on this before. I don't come up with like exercises, like repetitions to do. I think for me, I've always gotten enough exercise and repetition out of just playing the instrument. And when I was new to the instrument, I would play the instrument for hours at a time, right? Like I would skip school and stay home and play the instrument. I'm not suggesting anybody do anything as drastic as that, but I don't know about all these sort of repetitive exercises and stuff, and I don't know how much of that. With an exercise, you want to be careful. How much is that exercise training you to play the banjo, and how much is it just training you to do that exercise? So, use exercises. If you find exercises and repetitions that you like, by all means use them. I'm not really in the business of doing that. There is those two stretches that I've showed you, where you're opening and closing your hands repeatedly to stretch them out, and then where you're stretching your thumb and your individual fingers and then all your fingers. That to me is the only like physical warm up that I would do, and then I'm just going to start playing the music that I'm interested in playing. Whether that's whatever piece I'm working on or whatever. So I don't know. Yeah, actual thumb exercises. Do you have any thumb
clarify a bit of that.
exercises? I'm going to pull you up if you got thumb exercises that I don't
Yeah.
know about. How you doing, Jakob?
I'm good, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, good. Actually, I just thought because I have an old injury in my thumb, in my right thumb, and it's a bit awkward sometimes. It gets like sore when the weather gets cold and such. And
Yeah.
so I'm having a bit of a hard time with the overhand. I'm practicing like just playing tunes. Like this week, I've been really laser focusing on East Virginia, and which I think is good. But I just thought to ask you if you have one tune that in particular that the let's say the melody and stuff would be fairly simple, so that I could just concentrate on the bomb diddy, on the thumb part of the overhand picking too, because I'm having a kind of a hard time to get the thumb working as it should.
Yeah.
So that was more the idea, not like not like a physical exercise.
Okay,
but
yeah.
Like,
So there, tunes that are really easy, or not easy, but really simple, straightforward tunes. I will usually bring up Old Reuben, F sharp D, F sharp A D. That's a tuning that if new people will see that tuning on paper and might be intimidated by it. They don't want to try to travel to that tuning, but put your fear aside. If you haven't used that tuning before, go to that tuning. That's a very easy tune to play, and I think you can find a tab that I've put together for it. You can find tabs for it that are super complicated, but I think the tab that I put together for it shows just how simple it is. Also, in the course material that's attached to the first course video on the website, in that PDF that's called East Kentucky Banjo by George Gibson. You know what I'm talking about, Jacob? So in that PDF, if you download that, he's got a very simplified tab for Old Reuben. Go through that book, do some of, if you haven't already, go through that PDF, do some of those lessons, look at the Old Reuben lesson. That's a very simple tune, the way he lays it out. And his tab, you'll check that out. And that's something that's very simple and maybe will help you focus on that.
Yeah, that's just what I was looking for, because I think East Virginia, your version of East Virginia, I love it, and it's been excellent for two-finger picking. I played it probably 500 times the last few days.
Oh, good.
And it's really good, but for the overhand, I need something similar that I can really dig into to just get the thumb working. Then I can go on to other tunes. So I wanted to ask you about strings as well.
Okay.
I ordered a couple of bridges from Joel Hooks, and because I tried after you talked about the songster method and the tuning of the banjo, I realized I want to tune. I sing quite high up. So I want to tune really low with the ohm and with the steel strings.
Okay.
I get so low that the strings get really kind of twangy. So I want to try out. I want to go to nylons. And today I was looking on the interwebs for those Labella 17s, and it seems totally impossible. So if anybody in here has got a channel where I could order them that would ship internationally, I would be really grateful. I think Labella themselves don't ship.
Yeah, that's weird. If you want to experiment with tuning very low, you don't want those Labellas anyhow, because they're a little too light for what you're trying to do. They're going to be really floppy. So for you, can you get the Aquila Nile Gut? My understanding is these strings are made in Europe.
Okay.
So maybe I'm wrong about that, but I thought that the Aquila Nile Gut for sure were made in, Spain or something. So maybe you can get access to the Nile Gut, and with the Nile Gut, you just want to try the Aquila Nile Gut 6B first. That's the ones that I have on this banjo right now, and you can see they're fairly thick. But these are the lightest Nile Gut strings that you can get. And they're still a good deal heavier than the Labella number 17. So if you want to down tune low, you want at least strings this heavy. And if you want to go lower than me, you might even... These will probably do you. Try the Aquila Nile Gut 6B. And hopefully you can get those over there. You're in Finland, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you can get those in Finland.
If they're made in Europe, then that should be possible. Do you think they will work with the Joel Hooks bridges though?
Yeah.
Or do I have to largen the slots for the
So
string?
Joel copies copies his bridges historically. So one reason I use this bridge from Joel Hooks, this is the Morley. I don't know if you can even get close enough to really see it, but this is the Morley bridge. And it has a slightly, the slots are cut wider in the Morley bridge. So the Morley bridge can take the Nile Guts no problem. Do you remember what kind of bridge you got from him?
I actually got a few. I think I got that one as well.
Okay. So the Morley is probably the one.
Yeah.
Probably the Morley.
Yeah.
Those other bridges, he likes to put the historical narrow slots on them, and so they'll pretty much only take the Labellas. Most of his bridges you want to use Labella number 17 on, but this Morley bridge, you can use the Aquilas just fine. So yeah, try this Morley bridge out. This one has nice wide spacing. I like this bridge. This is my favorite bridge that he makes is the Morley. I think it's probably the best for all around old time banjo.
Can you open up those slots if they're too narrow? I've got a couple of those, and I just use a little file to open the slot up. That isn't going to hurt the bridge, is it?
Yeah, Ed, you can open the slot up. It's not something that I just throw out there because I think a lot of people maybe don't have the tools or the dexterity to do that properly, because if you can easily mess it up and then you've ruined a bridge. But if you can research or know how to cut slots in a bridge, there's a certain way, certain tools that you want to use.
They're cut in an angle, I understand.
Yeah, they're cut at a slight backward angle like this, and there's other details involved, little nuances of that to get a perfect bridge cut. So you can, like Ed is suggesting, you can open them up. People do that just fine. You can use a razor blade and really just kind of sliver off just one or both sides of the slot and widen it that way. I mean, we're talking about surgery here. Or you can take a small triangular file sometimes, and you can work it up the back of the bridge at an angle and open the slot up that way very carefully, because if you take off too much, then you've ruined the bridge. So it's best to take off a little and then stick it on the banjo, as tedious as it is, get everything tuned up and try it out. And if you don't like it, then cut it a little deeper. But anyhow, now we're getting into like wood shop talk, Ed, and that's why I don't bring that stuff up. But yeah, you can open up the slots at your own.
Thank you so much, Clifton.
Yes, sir.
And it appears that a Mackenzie put a link for a German website that has the strings you're looking for, that you could probably order.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Awesome. So Mark is asking if I have experience with S.S. Stewart's American Princess banjos. I've never played an American Princess, but it's a good banjo. I mean, if you get one in good condition at a good price, then that's fine and dandy. Again, with that, Mark, if you have a specific link or photos, you're welcome to email me and see what I think, or post them in that Collector's Corner forum at banjohangout.org. They'll tell you what you're looking at. But the problem with posting in there is that you then give away the banjo you're looking at buying, and everybody else sees it. And so that's the only caveat with posting in there, is that somebody will buy it out from under you. So
one interesting thing I learned about S.S. Stewart's, I don't know if I was reading it, or if you mentioned it, a lot of them, you'll see them, they say second grade, and that doesn't mean like a second, like a reject. It means like it's actually a cut above.
Yeah.
It's meant to imply a cut above a normal quality.
Yeah. Yeah, there was like the student model was like the lowest, and then they had the second grade models, and then they had everything above that. And of course, their catalog changed over time too, so it's tricky business. Oh, okay. So Kevin says, "What's your view on taking modern rock tunes, decomposing them back to a more traditional banjo tune?" I like that idea. I like that term of decomposition, decomposing them. Kevin, are you still in here? There he is.
Yeah, I'm still here.
I think that's an interesting thing there, Kevin, and I thought I'd pull you up. So, what, you got a particular piece in particular that you're thinking of decomposing?
No, just any songs. I like to listen to some rock songs, and then find a lot of them work in like triple C, because a lot of like metal songs are tuned that way, or like in a triple D or something.
I didn't know that.
Just sounds really interesting on the banjo.
Yeah. That's something that I'm glad you mentioned, Kevin, that tuning, GC, GCC, Darling Cora tuning. That is a real bluesy, kind of rock and roll sounding tuning. And I notice when when you play like Darling Cora, like, bow, 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 it's like, woo, you could really rock out on it. And so I've done that where, what's a tune? Like Dink Roberts does this almost like a rock and roll piece that's called Black Annie. There's other versions of Black Annie that aren't very good, like the Joe Thompson and Odell. They did Black Annie. It's kind of boring. But Dink Roberts' Black Annie is like kind of ridiculous. And I don't remember what tuning he's using, but when I was a kid, I worked up a version of that, and I went to triple C tuning, and it kind of came out sounding like a rock song. The other rock and roll tuning is, of course, F sharp D, F sharp A, D. You can get rock and roll sounds, those bluesy rock sounds out of that. Like you can play In the Pines. Old Reuben has that kind of dark sound. And oddly, don't ask me how, that tuning is kind of related to double C, which is related to triple C. Don't ask me how, but back to what you were talking about. Other examples that I'm thinking of, like like Black Betty would make a great, like, whoa, Black Betty, bam, balam, Black Betty had a child. A lot of those rock songs are old blues songs anyhow, right? And I think that your idea would work great because you're basically just kind of, like you said, decomposing them, rewinding them, taking the flesh off back to the bones of that piece of music, which originally, if any sort of classic or traditional rock song is really a sort of a blues song, would be my understanding. It comes from blues, and then blues originally was played on the banjo. And if you go back and listen to like interviews or read interviews with some of the early blues guitar players, they'll often mention that their father or mother or their grandfather or somebody was a banjo player. Some of those early blues men that we think of as blues guitarists, actually when they were kids they started out on banjos, because if they were kids in the late 1800s there may not have been guitars just everywhere. Banjo was more common in those days. But man, Kevin, that's a cool idea, and I think people should do it. You got anything else on your mind, or are you done with me?
I was just curious what you thought about that, and
Cool.
Yeah, great.
I think that's a great idea. Do it. Richard says he's heard In the Pines done in major and minor. That's true. Song reminds me of. So David says decomposing songs reminds me of culinary deconstruction, breaking familiar pieces down to take them somewhere they've not been. Yeah, I guess it's the same sort of thing. And you could almost we do it in archaeology too, if you think about it, where you're seeing something for what it is, and then you're peeling back layers of soil and sort of rewinding it to figure out what is actually going on here. And I could see you doing that with a culinary dish or a song or whatever. I had another really neat thing on my mind, but I forgot it. Do you have a list of available? Oh yeah, so Michael's asking if there is a list of available tunings and all the names for them. Michael, I don't have that list. There is a list on the internet. It's like somewhere like a Zepp Music or something. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. If you type up, like, if you go into Google or something and you search for, banjo tuning database or something like that, you can pull up this thing, and it's like on a Zepp Music something or other.com, and they have like thousands of banjo tunings listed there, and with information about who it was provided to the database by or where it was collected. So that's cool. I don't know, I don't have the link off it. And David just posted the link in here, zeppmusic.com. So everybody check that out. That's got a ton of tunings, and I actually find myself there. Blaine, you have a comment or a question about regional styles. Blaine, if you're still with us.
Yeah. I was speaking with, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm going to try to actually pull you up. I'm getting confused. There he is. I thought maybe you were back in the salt pits.
I'm in the parking lot of the salt pits. I was speaking with Adam Siegler yesterday. He's a pretty good player. He's from up north. And we were having a discussion about regional styles. And obviously there's a lot of focus and emphasis on, Round Peak styles in North Carolina, Kentucky styles, East Tennessee styles of play, or maybe the way Elise Sexton or Roscoe Holcomb plays. Are there any artists or, somewhat unique styles from up in the Northeast? Like, the Pennsylvania mountains where, you know, the coal mines were, or upstate New York, or, you know, because I know there had to have been players all up and down the East Coast, you know, throughout time.
Yeah, I think there's a major sampling error that we suffer from to this day, which is, you know, so all the people who first started recording banjo music, who they wanted hillbilly music or whatever, and, you know, most of these recording companies were out of New York City, some, you know, maybe out of Atlanta or whatever, but mostly out of like New York City and the urban north. For whatever reason, when these people wanted hillbilly music, they were drawn to where there were rural black populations. They went to the South, you know, and they did not seem interested in recording any kind of, you know, hillbilly music that was from like north of Washington, D.C., this like arbitrary geographic indicator. So you get a major sampling error where we don't have any early recordings of like folk banjo from that area, and it can lead you to believe that maybe there wasn't any, but I doubt that. You have a lot of early recordings, but they're all playing the classical, they're playing guitar style banjo, or they're playing some kind of a derivative of a commercial guitar style banjo style. So you don't really run into that. The other weird thing that happens too is even black banjo players, you know, raised in the South or wherever the hell they're from, when they emerge up north as a professional banjo player, they're guitar style banjoists. They're playing classic banjo, that commercial classic banjo style that dominated from like 1880 to 1920 or whatever. Everybody was playing that up there. And even the vernacular songs, folk songs, seem to have been played in that style. Also, the banjo was just, hands down, just not as popular, you know, so you don't get that much up there. Everybody's playing the fiddle and stuff up there. There must have been, I don't know, it may simply have been that there wasn't enough cultural backbone to the banjo playing up north to where you developed any kind of distinct regional styles that would be recognized by researchers today. Like it's probably there, but we just can't see it. So I don't know. And that's a question that comes up all the time. It's like, what the hell? People were playing banjos up north. Where's all that stuff? I don't know. It seems to have been dominated by commercial banjo playing, and that everybody kind of viewed it through that filter for a while up there. I don't know. This is something you could ask like Joel Hooks, but Joel is going to basically bring up, in my experience, he's going to bring up a bunch of professional musicians and stuff from up north. There's not a lot of documented folk banjoists from that area. And I honestly think it's just because you did not have that cultural backbone there. And what I mean by the cultural backbone, honestly, is like a history of slavery. Because wherever you have a history of slavery, you have a banjo tradition. History of slavery in the U.S., you have a banjo tradition that existed there going forward. So, and if you don't have a real solid, prolonged history of slavery, like you do up north or whatever, and you don't have that concentration of black music that people were picking up on. I think that's honestly what it boils down to, because if you go back, people will mention, if you go back to 1736, you know, 1740, there's banjo players in New York City, and it's not uncommon. People know what the banjo is. They've heard it before in New York City, but it's like it kind of disappears. So I think because those black banjo players that were introducing the music in the 1700s, I think when they went into cities and stuff up north, they just kind of scattered. And whereas down south, as harsh as conditions were, as bad as things were, people did have something resembling a cohesive community where you had a cultural backbone, where that instrument existed in people's minds and was passed down, and it was part of, you had to have one to do certain things. Didn't exist up north. So, and that's just me guessing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he's from up there, so he had sort of the same approach to it. He's just like, there's just nothing up here, unfortunately. Because he wants to learn some of those deep cuts from his region, and he's just not, he can't find them.
A lot of it's just been lost. It's not to say that it wasn't there. Growing up in Florida, I had the same problem. Try to find old recordings of traditional tunes played in Florida. There's almost none. There was almost no field recording work done in Florida. And so you try to do the next best thing. I mean, you go up even into South Georgia. There's almost no field recording work done in South Georgia or South Alabama. What few field recorders did come down, they came from the north typically, and it was in the 30s through the 60s, and they were interested in black music. And so mostly you get work songs and the prison chain gang songs. And if you go east on the East Coast, you get the Gullah Geechee songs and stuff. But those people were not typically playing a lot of banjos or fiddles, or if they were, the field recorder wasn't interested in gathering those kind of songs. And so you see that another sampling error is that whatever fad is going on in academia or in the cities at that time, that there's a folk revival going on, that's the only music that the revivalists and the collectors and the recorders see in the field. They go into the field looking for a white banjo player in Appalachia, they're going to find that. So if they go down into South Florida or South Georgia, they're looking for a Gullah field hand who's going to sing them a song about rice that comes from Africa. They're going to find that. They're not going to find banjo players and fiddle players and stuff. So you have all these crazy sampling errors. That music probably was there. It's just gone. We've lost it. And you have to realize that this huge wealth of field recordings and videos and records and stuff that we have is just a tiny sliver of what we used to have, of what actually existed in our culture. We just have this tiny sliver left, and that's what we're all left to emulate and copy and bicker over and all this stuff. It's just a sliver. We almost have nothing. So there probably was stuff up north. Just like I know there was probably a regional banjo tradition in South Georgia, a regional banjo tradition in North Florida, but we know nothing of it. It just wasn't recorded.
All those recordings are basically filtered through the opinions of the people who were recording them.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like if in the 1890s people said, "Oh, they're singing English ballads in the mountains." So in the 1890s, the first folklorists went into eastern Kentucky, for example, with these, to just document the words. They went back with early recording machines later, and they were looking for old English songs in the mountains. And by God, they found them. They found hundreds of them. But they weren't looking for African songs. They weren't looking for black music. They weren't looking for banjo songs. They weren't even looking for fiddle tunes or any of that. They were looking for English ballads. And so if you read the work that what David is alluding to there and what I'm trying to explain, if you read the work that those people produced from their research trips into the mountains in the late 1800s, you would think that people were only singing English ballads, because that's the only thing the researchers were interested in. So that goes on and on. Thank you, Blaine. Thank you, David. I'm going to try to move to somebody. Somebody had one. Oh, so Cindy says, what were your lessons like with George Gibson when you were first starting with George? So, Cindy, I didn't really have... The way that I learned from George is similar to the way that I try to teach y'all. We didn't really do formal lessons. So, the first time I ever met George, my mother had bought his CD, and he had his damn mailing address on the back of the CD. So I sent him a letter. I was 13 years old, and I just straight up said, hey, I live near you. I'm really trying to learn to play the banjo. I can't figure it out. I need somebody just to show me a couple things. I approached it real like, hey, just show me a couple things and I'll leave you alone. I'll never bother you again. And he actually sent me a letter back and gave me his phone number or whatever and invited me to come. And of course I had to tell him I was only by the time I went to his house, I was only 14. So my mom had to drive me and stuff. He still laughs about that because I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I gave him a warning that my mother was going to have to drive me there. So we just hung out. And that first day of hanging out at George's house, when I went to visit him in Florida, when he was still living in Florida, I think I was 14 at the time, we hung out probably for about 7 or 8 hours until my mom just could not, she had to come get me. So then that was the end of that. But it really just consisted of George showing me his banjos and asking me, he sort of asked me to play different instruments and stuff, let me play banjos and things, and he kind of got a feel for what I was doing. And then of course I was already playing music that he recognized, stuff that I'd learned off of his album. So he got a kick out of that. And then I think we were kind of hooked on each other. We just became pretty much good friends from the get-go. As much as a 13 or 14-year-old can be friends with somebody who's in his 60s at the time, we were good friends. It never really was a teacher-student relationship. And again, I'm trying to recreate that here. I don't want any formality involved. Is there a particular style they played at traveling medicine shows? Richard is asking that. Richard, if you're still with us, I'll pull you up. But yeah, a particular style that played with the traveling medicine shows. So no, not really. Originally, the original style that was played on the stage was what they call the stroke style, which is basically overhand. Minstrel style, you can look up. They also, in the early days, they called that banjo style to differentiate that from guitar style. So guitar style was the 3-finger picking style that was sort of a commercial, formal style, and then they called this banjo style or whatever. So the earliest shows were, of course, not even medicine shows. They were just circuses in the 1820s, 1830s, and the banjo didn't appear in the circus until the 1830s. And of course, it was a blackface performer. And they started out as a lone blackface performer standing in the circus ring to do sort of an interlude show in between bigger acts. So the banjo started out as a sideshow, kind of a freak sideshow, or they'd let it in the center ring for just a short time, and it'd be one banjoist with his face blacked up, standing with a gourd banjo, oddly enough. I don't know how anybody could have heard any of the music. They must have been totally silent in the audience. And he was playing the down-picking, style. That's originally how it started out. My understanding, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that the medicine show stuff kind of evolved in tandem. You always had people going around selling snake oil and elixirs and vitamins and whatever. But they sort of incorporated that and made a show out of it and said, hey, it's a free show. And they would travel to your town and offer this free variety show, but the whole time they're trying to sell you pills or medicine or whatever. So that really, I think that comes out of the circus tradition. People were probably always trying to do it, but I think that the circus tradition of the blackface banjo player in the circus merged with that old medicine show that probably been going on since medieval times. That merged probably after the Civil War. I don't know for sure. Certainly the merger had happened by 1880. It was complete. So by 1880 you had the traveling medicine show that I think Richard is talking about, that we all think about, vaudeville, variety act. It's different from a minstrel show, because the early minstrel shows are just pure blackface acts where they're completely lampooning black plantation workers the whole time. The medicine show was different from that. The show was free to get you to buy the medicine, whereas the minstrels, you paid for the show and it was just the show. So anyhow, blah, 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 blah. But what style would have been typically played in that classic medicine show that we're thinking of? Typically, it all depends on the banjo player. If you had a real professional banjo player who was really up on his or her skills, they would have been playing that 3-finger classic banjo style or guitar banjo style, and that you can talk to people like Joel Hooks or Jerron Paxton about for days on end. That's what most professional banjo players, they were playing this by 1890. They were all doing this. But you would have had a great variety. If you had sort of a more down home vernacular medicine show band, they're probably going to be playing overhand or 2-finger or whatever. So I don't know, Richard, but I went on and on there, and that's a little lesson of my understanding of medicine shows. Hell, it's 1:07, everybody. My brain is about fried. If y'all will let me go, I'm going to end this. We've been at it for an hour. I've had a lot of fun. Let's wrap it up. Okay, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thanks for these. This was a really stimulating one. Kevin, I really liked your comment. Blaine, Jacob, Richard, Karen reminded me of that old English song. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Have a good one. I'm going to let you go. Bye.